the co-founder and CEO of DLA Ignite. Today I've got with me Zoe Campbell. Thank you very much for joining me. Zoe and I are going to be discussing the 3 leadership factors needed for the digital workforce culture. Before we get into that, Zoe, tell people where they can get hold of you.
So I'm very active on LinkedIn. So if you type in Zoe Campbell, I should pop up. I work for Hanover Search. I'm also on Twitter as Zoe Campbell. I think my the link is Zoe E. Maybe Zoe E. Campbell, but yes, I'm on Twitter, and I'm certainly very active on LinkedIn with over 95,000 followers. So
wow, that's amazing.
Very easy to get hold of me.
Yeah, wow. I'll have to talk to you about that another time. Think the world has changed, and I think it even changes by the week. There's this quote going around, isn't there? There's a Lenin quote that nothing happens for decades, and then decades happens in weeks. Yes. And I think that's very appropriate. It's not often I quote Lenin, to be honest. And I think there's a lot of stuff going around about what people need to do, but there isn't anything about what leaders can do. I actually made a comment about yesterday on a LinkedIn post that it's about time where there was a discussion about leaders. So I mean, let's open up. What is it that leaders should be doing?
So I think leaders during this period, obviously any leader within a business will have a highly pressurized job just on a day-to-day basis, but this has amplified it, and they're having to make decisions very rapidly and very quickly. And I know that board members and senior leaders are working longer hours, cross time zones. But I think in terms of the leadership that's needed today and in this environment has shifted, and what people are looking for and what they need is that authenticity. They need to be listened to. The employees need to feel valued. And so it's taking the time to embrace the employees at this moment. I think a bit of humanity, a bit of kindness, and a bit of care is very key. It's very easy to focus on the bottom line because all businesses are exceptionally challenged with revenues, and profits are being hit left, right, and centre, and businesses are going out of business. We're seeing that. But I think if you can take time to take your focus off the bottom line and where the business is, and spend a little bit of time with your employees, to keep them engaged, to tell them what's happening, to take them with you on this challenging journey, will actually reap benefits and rewards. But I also think leaders are highly stressed, and they need to look after themselves. They need to take some time out to give themselves a bit of self-love, if that makes sense. And whether that's through coaching, I've spoken to a number of leadership development coaches who are doing, rather than monthly sessions, a quick fire every 2 weeks, because as you said, this is a very rapidly changing landscape. So I think, it is about that authenticity, about that humanity, and showing a bit of vulnerability. And just because I think having that openness and honesty with your employees maintains their trust. So I think really this is a time where if you're treating your employees in the right way, you will retain them going forward. So it's self-love to your employees and making sure and listening to them to make sure they're okay, because we're all in different situations. Some of us are on our own, some of us are with families. You've got couples that are both working and trying to self-school children. So it's just making sure you're listening for those little flags, and then trying to make sure that either other managers or colleagues are keeping in contact, and that sort of collaborative environment is maintained, rather than having this sort of crisis mode and knee-jerk reactions, but just taking a little bit of time just to think, because the decisions made today will really impact the business in the future.
Yes. I think that's really true. I think we've all been in situations where we've had the 1 hour all hands call, which is all about transmit, and then you finish it and you go, well, I will never get that hour back again. Yeah. And what we've also seen is the merger of work and home, which is, I can see behind you a skylight, and for some reason it's gone dark here, and I'm going to make it a bit lighter, but you can see bookcases and stuff behind me.
Yeah.
And so we can actually see into people's lives and get it, and that's what we need, is that we actually need to realize that there is a person there, regardless of where they are in the hierarchy. I've got one person off because her son is autistic and needs 24-hour care. I've got another person off because they've got a son who's got Asperger's, and again, he's actually doing all the homeschooling. So everybody has different
challenges,
home challenges, and as leaders we have to embrace that. And I think it's so important, and I think that the humility and the actually showing that you're human with exactly the same issues as everybody else, this is the time for that.
Exactly. I was speaking to a CEO yesterday, and he's put in place every week, so 1 week he'll send out a sort of group email. Then the second week he has a Zoom with all 130 employees, and they're doing one-to-one. The managers are doing one-to-ones on a weekly basis. So whilst this is taking up more time, it is actually increasing the engagement of the workforce, and they're feeling valued, and they've got that sort of trust that they're being looked after, and so I think there's different ways to approach it, and obviously large companies can't do town halls with everyone, but it is just taking that little bit more time just to consider.
And is there any other things that you in your experience that you can share with us in terms of what leaders can do? I mean, a classic example is that they actually need to make sure that they eat properly and exercise, like we all need to do.
Yeah.
I mean, is there anything else that we need?
I mean, I've always said being a CEO or being a board member is a very lonely place.
It is.
Few people to actually talk to and offload to. So I would certainly recommend professional development coaching, and someone that you can talk to in confidence and offload and say, these are my stresses, these are my worries, these are my concerns. Because whilst you're looking after all your employees and customers, it's about also looking after your own mental well-being and health. So yes, going out and doing some exercise, but being able to talk through the pressures you're under with a third party is exceptionally beneficial, I think.
I agree. There's a book called The $1 Billion Coach.
Yes.
And I don't know if you've read it, but it's for those that haven't read it, it's about an individual who was a coach to Silicon Valley. And, he coached Steve Jobs, he coached the two guys who set up Google, and the reason why it's $1 billion, because if you added all the turnovers of all the companies, it would come to $1 billion. And the thing is, if Steve Coach has got a coach, then and we often quote him and think he's brilliant. He was, but he had the humility to realize that he didn't know all the answers. And that a mentor or a coach would actually be something that would be of use to him.
Yes, and I totally agree. And quite often I find that in normal times that board leaders and senior managers don't think they need coaching. Well, I think everybody needs some professional coaching and mentoring, because it helps you develop as a person and as a manager. Quite often we're put into senior leadership positions not having had a huge amount of management experience. So having that added assistance and support especially during these times is something I would really recommend to anybody, quite frankly. And I think firms should be looking at it, not just for, teams, but for individuals to support them.
And how do you see this? How do you see, or what should leaders be doing right now in terms of setting the tone for culture within the organisation?
So I think culture at the moment is key to the success of any organisation. And so it goes back to that listening and making people feel valued and important and part of. But also the culture of a business will come out in terms of how customers are also dealt with. It's been quite interesting watching some of the businesses that I've worked for and I know very well that have a culture in place, dare I say it, but what's coming to the fore during this crisis period and turbulence is the underlying culture of a business and how people are being treated. And I think if you're not treating your customers and your employees in the same way, if you say you've got employees dealing with direct customer relations, and the actual employees are being treated well by the firm, but the actual firm isn't treating the customers in the same way, that's going to have a negative impact, and they're going to feel the brunt of how the company's treating the customers.
Yes.
So that instantly is it is damaging to your employees because they've got that added stress. So I think we're seeing a number of companies at the moment who have had brilliant reputations and cultures, but it's about actually maintaining it and being on top of it. And especially in the financial services market where I work, the regulator has been all over culture even before this all kicked off. So I think now is the time to really drive a culture of openness, honesty, and transparency. I mean, all businesses will have their vision and their key buzzwords like agility and innovation and respect, but actually those are just words. And if you don't actually explain what those behaviors are for those words, then nobody really knows what the culture of the business should be and how they should behave. So really distilling that down and saying, this is what we mean by respect. This is what we mean by agility. And then employees can fully engage. And that then leaks out into how they're dealing with the customers and the wider environment. So I think getting your culture right at the moment and staying on top of it and making sure that everyone is behaving in the right way is very key, and pulling people if they're not. Because
I agree, and I think that one of the things that often I think one of the mistakes that people have made is this movement to remote work. Is a case of what we do is we give everybody a copy of Zoom or Microsoft Teams and off they go. And actually it's not like that. It's actually a change program. And we so there is an impact on the organization because there's a change to the way that you work and the way that you work with the clients. That may actually have a legal implication, which organizations may have not taken into account, but also has the fact that when I deal with the bank, it now takes longer to deal with it because there are people at home. I don't understand why that is the case, because I thought using technology made it slicker, but it does, or it does seem to. So there should be an explanation of that to me as the customer.
Yes, yeah, and I think talking about technology, just picking up on that it's something that has been on the the board agenda for a couple of years at least, if not longer. But the questions have been: do we invest? How much do we invest? And what do we get out of it? Whereas now it's now is the time to really invest in technology, because we're not going to go back to what we knew as the norm. We're now in a new norm.
Yeah.
And agile working and flexible and remote working will all become, sort of just as usual. Office spaces will probably be reduced.
Yes.
And so having the right technology to allow everyone to operate effectively is very key. And so I know companies that have, had to ship out thousands of laptops.
Yeah.
But doing the training rapidly for them so they can get up to speed, so they're not hindered by technology, but rather enabled by it, is really important.
So how do leaders, what do they need to do to adapt?
I think it's trust. I think in the first few weeks during this, we went into outright panic mode.
Yes.
But the leaders I'm speaking to are now realizing that actually productivity hasn't been dropped.
Yeah.
People are taking responsibility. They know what their job is. They know what they've got to do, and they are getting on with it. So I think it's giving your team and your employees that ability to operate and be flexible around children, and allow them to work later into the evening, but know that it's going to get done. So I think that ability to really just trust your employees to do their job, rather than chasing them constantly with KPIs and have you done this and have you done that, because it compounds the pressure everyone is under.
So what is it that leaders need to be focusing on?
I think taking measured decisions. Everyone have put their strategic plan in place for 2020, but it's understanding, I think, and taking a considered view on the projects that need to be accelerated, things that can be put on hold. But I'm also hearing that then people have now got more time to do projects that were on the back burner, because they've now got the ability to get on with other things, because certain things have, dropped off, in terms of what they need to do, because the business world has shifted. So a lot of these transformation projects and restructuring, that's all still going on, but is being driven forward rapidly. But I think knee-jerk decisions at this moment could have a very detrimental impact on a business.
So in summary, we should, as a business, we should know our cash position.
Yes.
By now. We should know who we're keeping on. We should know who we're laying off, and we should know who we're furloughing.
Hopefully, yes. I mean, I think the next 6 to 8 weeks will be very telling. I think we're beginning to come through the really hard time. We're now getting into a more BAU. People are used to doing
business as usual.
But it's about, I think the next 6 to 8 weeks, people will have calmed a lot more and have a clearer view of what their balance sheet and liquidity will really look like, as the world gets used to doing video conferencing and Zoom and all these different apps. I was talking to colleagues in America, and they're booming because they're all in different time zones. So this is how they operate. So they're very used to it. I think it's just, in terms of sort of onboarding new people, the face-to-face is just not going to happen. So people have to bite the bullet and trust and onboard, virtually and get them going.
We found that some people. So I mean, if you think about the world actually revolves around buying and selling things. Yes. We all have to buy and we all have to sell things. And I mean, we had a number of people where we'd been talking to them for 6 months, and there was always another priority. And all of a sudden, they rang us up and said, "You need to come in on Friday," and the whole thing's accelerated. So I think what we're seeing is that there is a change of priority.
Yes.
But I've also been saying to some people that let's I first of all need to say I have 2 elderly parents. I may never see them again, so this is really scary.
Same position.
And the number of people that I see, dying, it's a horrible, horrible thing. If we park that for a moment and talk about business, we are actually being given a gift, which is time. There's lots of things, so, I know people that have been furloughed, and I've said to them, 3 weeks ago, you were telling me you didn't have time for this, this, and this. Now you do. It's like, oh yeah. So a friend of mine, he's telling me for 6 years he wants to be a rapper. Right? For 6 years. He's 30, used to be my personal trainer. He's 33 or something. I want to be a rapper. He never did anything about it. He's just produced his first rap song. I think it's not something that I particularly like, but in terms of the quality of it, it's amazing. But he's got the time to do that.
Yes.
I'm not telling everybody to go and be a rapper, but you are being given a gift of time.
Yes.
Even if you're working and not furloughed, that you can start doing other things. And the other thing I need to say is we've got one client that's insisted in paying us. They said, we have to pay all our suppliers. We offered to do something for free, and they said, no, we have to pay you. Yeah. And I think that's a great way to show leadership, because again, money makes the world go round. We all have rent to pay, we all have food to buy, etc., etc. And it's great for a large company. I will remember them forever.
Exactly.
As I remember them forever. As the company that basically said, we insist on paying you. It's Kennedy's, the lawyers, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. They've insisted on paying us. It's like, thank you.
Yeah, and it is again picking up on the people being furloughed, and I know a lot of people do, on furlough that are, training to do 5Ks or taking up different, learning how to trade stocks and doing some really interesting things that they'd never get around to doing. But I think also, to your point about being paid by that firm, that goes again to the point of how are you treating your customers. Your customers will remember, and you can do a huge amount of damage to your brand and market reputation now that will have a long-term impact going forward on your actual business. And we're seeing a lot of things in the news with class actions, and these companies were always saying, we will always pay, we will always do this, we'll always support you. But actually now the messaging has changed somewhat, and as soon as it gets onto social media and it gets into the broadsheets, this will have a very damaging impact.
I was going to ask you about social media. I mean, there are risks, and go through the risks and talk about those. I think that would be useful. Yeah.
So I think obviously there's lots of fake news on social media to be ignored. But also, I think when you're making decisions in terms of how you're treating your customer, because social media is such a hugely used platform, once these things get out, they're out there forever. And if your business is built on its brand, its reputation, and care for its customers, people going forward will think twice, whether or not they want to do business with that company. And so I think the social media impact that we're seeing at the moment is it's putting a huge spotlight, and potential small little issues are being exacerbated by social media, and whether it's Twitter and Facebook, but it's being picked up in the news. So it goes back to that point. Think before you act.
I think one of the things that the big thing that I see that brands miss about social media is that they don't understand the world is now transparent.
Yes.
So I'm old enough to remember Gerald Ratner in the UK. For people that don't live outside the UK, Gerald Ratner was a very successful jeweler. He had over 1,000 shops in the high street. It was a household name. Everybody went and bought their engagement ring from Ratner's. And he stood up at a conference and he said his products were crap. And he said that and basically they were pretty worthless. And he went through this, and he'd actually done the presentation many times before, but it got picked up with the press, and it basically went bankrupt overnight. No one bought anything from Ratner's, and it went down. But the thing is that in those days we didn't know it was crap.
Yes.
He had to tell it to us.
Yeah.
Whereas today we know things when they're rubbish,
Yeah.
and we're not, and none of us are stupid. So it's like, before COVID, there was an outbreak of on a cruise ship.
Yes.
Of usual sort of diarrhea and stuff, and the cruise liner couldn't understand how people found out about it. It's because someone tweeted about it.
Yeah.
And then the press picked up on it. The thing that leaders have to understand is with social media, everything is transparent.
Yes, I agree.
And whatever you do, you have to think or understand that people will know about it.
But I think on the flip side, to put a positive spin on this, social media. I mean, a lot of firms have never fully engaged with social media, but I'm seeing an uptick in that in terms of getting positive messaging out there, and in good, useful information. So it can be used to benefit the business, and engage your customers, engage employees, and engage the wider audience, to develop your brand. So actually, there's two sides to this coin, but it's how you actually take hold of it.
Yes, and the positives is that there is nothing more powerful than getting an authentic set of employees on social media talking authentically about your brand, because the people that I'm connected to on social, I know and love. And therefore you're talking about the brand so I know that you don't take you how do I explain this? If you tell me that the company that you work for is great in this particular way, I believe you. And if you're explaining it in an authentic way, not as, hey, I work for this company and isn't it great? You go, well, yeah, well, you would say that because you work there, but doing it in an authentic way, not like different like an advert, and getting more and more people to talk about that through your network. It's so powerful.
It is. It really is. And you're right. Authenticity, transparency, openness, showing a little bit of humanity and a bit more vulnerability. And yeah, it is so powerful.
I've got a guy who basically he posts stuff about the fact that he's having to look after the children, and that shows humility, and it shows vulnerability.
Yes.
But he gets an awful lot of engagement because everybody else is going, I'm in exactly the same boat, mate.
Yeah, it is. And I think also, for single people as well that are living on their own, there's a lot of help and support out there as well, through social media. So yes, it can be very positive, but it can also be very damaging.
So at the start of this, we set the exam question that there were 3 leadership factors needed for the digital workforce culture. What would you summarize those to be?
Openness, honesty, transparency, and also trust.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Is there anything that we've particularly missed out?
I don't think so. I mean, I think, we're going through turbulent times. It is a constantly moving platform, and people are having to adjust and adapt on a day-by-day basis. But it is that it's so important to give yourself a bit of self-love and a bit of care, and take some time just to decompress, because the pressures that we're all under are far greater than they would have been in a normal day job without all this going on. So yes, self-love, and reaching out to people that may be struggling, just to say hi, how are you doing, and just raise them up a bit, I think is really valuable.
Yeah, I'm running a fancy dress team call I've got one in next week's time. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we do pub quizzes.
And that's not my request to do fancy dress. It was the other people that wanted the fancy dress. But I will be going in fancy dress, coming in fancy dress. So.
Any theme to the fancy dress?
No, whatever you want, because you can't I'd go into Kingston and buy something, but you've basically got to do so I know other people that have done the thing. So I went to a virtual birthday party where they'd planned it out, where they say, right now I want you to all run away and find a hat. So we did that, and then I think everybody's done this. So we're kind of working our way through that. But again, it's about showing some humility. Now I know that it's not everybody's cup of tea. I know that some people will not come to the call because they won't like dressing up in fancy dress. Yeah. But some of the team asked for it, so we're going to do it.
Yeah, and we're doing the same at our firm. We have a social on a Friday. We have a pub landlord, so to speak, and we all join in, and we have on Zoom, and we have a get together and a laugh. So, but you're right, it's not everyone's cup of tea, and I think just understanding how different people like to operate, so that you can be aware of making sure that they're okay and they're not left isolated.
Yes.
So yes, it's there are very many ways that people are engaging. I'm having virtual drinks with girlfriends, and I'm catching up with more people more of the time, but you do tend to get screen fatigue, so it is important to move away from the screen.
It is.
And maybe read a book or go and do some exercise, but not beat yourself up that you're not sitting at your laptop doing work.
I agree. Yeah. Zoe, it's been great talking to you. The time is up. I know it goes very, very quickly. Yes. Remind everybody where they can get hold of you. You're big on LinkedIn.
Yes.
Way more followers than me. So remind everybody where that is.
So it's Zoe Campbell. I'm at Hanover Search. If you can't actually link to me, because I'm quite private on my LinkedIn, feel free to email me at zoe.campbell@hanoversearch.com, and then I can connect you to me.
Okay, perfect. So have a great day, and thank you for sharing your expertise with us.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.